Welcome to another lecture in the Avant-Garde lecture series. Today we're going to be looking at John Cage. His life, his works, his philosophies, a general overview, and from there we can go deeper into maybe analysing his music, into other avant-garde avenues, whatever is revealed. So without further ado, let's begin with an introduction. John Cage, 1912 to 1992, was an American composer, music theorist, and pioneer of avant-garde music. His innovative approaches to composition, sound, and the role of the composer challenged traditional Western notions of music, influencing countless artists and reshaping 20th century music. Cage is most famously associated with the concept of indeterminacy and the use of chance operations, which he used to dismantle conventional musical structures. And you may be wondering how he did this. Well, let's learn on. John Milton Cage, Jr. was born on September the 5th, 1912 in Los Angeles, California. It's a happening place, Los Angeles, isn't it? His father was an inventor and his mother worked as a journalist. Inventor, that says a lot. I wonder if he saw his dad doing a lot of inventory things and he thought, yep, that's me. Cage attended Pomona College but dropped out after 2 years, feeling that the educational environment was restrictive. He then travelled to Europe, where he studied music informally. Upon returning to the United States, he studied with composers Henry Cowell and Arnold Schoenberg. Schoenberg in particular was a significant influence, introducing Cage to the concept of 12-tone music, though Cage would later diverge significantly from Schoenberg's methods, as we will find out. This is where we can see more of the influence from his father, potentially. Cage is credited with inventing the prepared piano, a piano altered by placing objects such as bolts, screws, rubber and other materials between or on the strings to create percussive, non-traditional sounds. So it's literally like you get your piano, you've got your strings, and in between the strings you can place like a bolt or a nut, and it can sit on either string so that when the piano presses the key, the string will vibrate, but it will have like the bolt touching it, and that will make an additional sound. You can have bits of paper that you can leave on the strings and that vibrates in symphony, but also doing its own thing because it's paper and physics exists. Bits of rubber, screws, pencils you can put in between there. Anything within reason. Sonatas and Interludes is a seminal work for prepared piano, reflecting Cage's interest in non-Western philosophies and the exploration of the mystical and the spiritual. A lot of people say that the prepared piano has a connection to the gamelan in terms of its sound, and the gamelan itself predates the Hindu-Buddhist culture that dominated Indonesia in its early records and thus represents an indigenous art form of Indonesia. He could have heard it while studying and working with Henry Cowell in the early 1930s. Influenced by Zen Buddhism and the I Ching, an ancient Chinese divination text, Cage began to employ chance operations in his compositions, removing the ego and subjective decision-making from the compositional process. For example, Music of Changes, 1951. Music of Changes is a piano composition entirely composed using chance operations based on the I Ching. This marked a significant departure from traditional compositional techniques, focusing on the creation of a work free from the constraints of the composer's taste and intentions. This is an interesting concept, actually, because a lot of philosophy talks about the violence of thought on the artwork. So, for instance, you could look at The Grammars of Creation by George Steiner, philosophical text, something you really need to delve into and think about. It's a thinky text. You could say, oh, is the composer ever free? Because what they already know, their preconceived ideas, can act as a kind of violence on the artwork itself, influencing it. Or it, like, similarly, a listener's interpretation and what they expect to hear can act as a sense of, it's like an act of violence on the artwork. It influences the artwork. The artwork isn't a pure thing in itself because it's interpreted by people that already have preconceived ideas about things already. You can't really avoid it. It's just an interesting, I guess it's a paradox. Like, how can you interpret something free from what you expect it to be? You can't, because we have all this knowledge. And so Cage's idea as a means of avoiding that or overcoming it was his Music of Changes, and it departed significantly from traditional compositional techniques, which you could say at the time composers were getting too used to, so that they'd lost their critique. It become like a reified thing and could contribute to this act of violence on the work of art. Again, read Grammars of Creation or read Heidegger. the origin of the work of art as well. That'll help explain this bit. Cage was focusing on creating a piece of work that was free from the constraints of the composer's tastes and intentions, so their own preconceived knowledge about the thing. The way the music is set out, it renders things that could arise kind of unpredictably, in a way, more so than previous compositional techniques where they really were constrained by the composer. This is less constrained. If you want to know more about this, I do talk about it in Composing with Restrictions. It's a practice-based project that I did in order to see if, I knew I couldn't, but in order to sort of explore through practice not being able to overcome my own preconceived ideas about how music should be written, but using things that I wasn't familiar with in order to do something that I wasn't used to doing and coming up with things that I wouldn't have done before. Anyway, the videos are here if you want to watch them. There's 3 of them. We'll look at 4 minutes 33 now, 1952. 4 minutes 33. This is perhaps Cage's most famous and controversial piece. 4 minutes 33 consists of the performers remaining silent for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. The work challenges the audience to consider the ambient sounds of the environment as the music itself, thereby redefining the boundaries of what music can be. This piece was a radical statement about the nature of sound, silence and listening, proposing that all sounds, not just those traditionally considered musical, could be music. And I've said this in other videos, but it arose because, well, did it arise because of this? He went into an anechoic chamber and he was hoping to hear silence, and he didn't experience silence. He could hear his nervous system and his pulse. That makes you think there is no such thing as silence, because even if you remove all external sounds, you're still going to hear yourself. And in order to experience true silence, does that mean you have to be dead? But if you are dead, can you experience silence? So silence itself is an ungraspable, out of reach, constant thing. It doesn't exist. Can we ever truly, really experience it? And so writing a piece where people do nothing, in theory, writing a piece for silence, it's like drawing attention to the fact that there isn't silence. Is it the paradox? And that's not quite the word. It's a thinky thing. Anyway, we can do a video on that as well if you want. There's a lot to unpack there, even though he's literally written nothing. And he's definitely removed the constraints of the composer in that piece. And if you understand his philosophies, the interest in Buddhism, for instance, you can see where he's coming from a bit more, and you can understand his perspective. And yes, if you didn't know, and you approach the piece with your own preconceived ideas about how you think it should be and all that, you might not understand what he's getting at, but that's your own violence of thought acting upon the thing and masking its true potential. Do you know what I mean? So the concepts behind it are interesting and difficult to grasp, but require a lot of thought and are worth it, because when you come through the other side, you can see things slightly differently, and you can realise that we're all just, are we in control of our own interpretations? Probably not. It's all based on what we already know. And again, this is something that's talked extensively in psychology. So psychologists out there will be like, yeah, this is common sense, but it's not something that we think about as composers. And especially in relation to ourselves and what we compose. We think we're being free and new and different, and we're not usually. I think our music would be written despite us. We're all part of a unit of people. Unit of people? Collective? It's a discussion point anyway. It's something that's worth talking about. It's not something you can easily state in a sentence, I think. This is a Frida Kahlo mug, by the way. Cage was a pioneer in the use of electronic media. His work, Imaginary Landscape No. 4 in 1951, was scored for 12 radios, showcasing his interest in using technology and the environment as instruments. So again, remember, his father was an inventor and his mother was a journalist. It's just interesting. He collaborated with artists like Merce Cunningham, a choreographer, and Robert Rauschenberg, a visual artist, integrating music, dance, and visual art into multimedia performances. Cage was deeply influenced by Zen Buddhism, which emphasised mindfulness, presence, and the acceptance of impermanence. This is important to note when we think about his work. His engagement with Eastern thought encouraged him to abandon the idea of music as a form of communication of specific ideas or emotions, and instead embrace it as an experience of the present moment. The influence of Zen is evident in Cage's use of silence, spontaneity, and the aesthetic of simplicity and emptiness. So we've got silence, spontaneity, simplicity, and emptiness. He did indeed follow a macrobiotic diet inspired by Zen Buddhism and Eastern philosophies. His interest in this diet was closely aligned with his fascination with Zen Buddhism, which emphasises simplicity, mindfulness, and a harmonious way of living. The philosophies behind his music embodied his whole life as well, even what he ate. Cage saw the macrobiotic diet as a means to align his physical body with the natural order, much like his music sought to reflect natural processes and chance. I feel like understanding a bit more about the person can reveal more about the music as well. Cage's commitment to macrobiotics and Zen can be seen as part of his broader philosophy of life, which rejected rigid structures and embraced openness, balance and the unexpected, both in his personal lifestyle and in his approach to music and art. Abandoning rigid structures. I think he does do that, yes, but also I feel like with everything, you can end up in a rut doing the same thing, which in itself can become another structure. Following a macrobiotic diet, for instance. You have to be very precise and you have to follow rules in order to do that, right? Cage had a long-term professional and personal relationship with Merce Cunningham, one of the most innovative choreographers of the 20th century. Their partnership was characterised by a shared interest in breaking the boundaries of their respective art forms. Cage composed music for many of Cunningham's dance works, and together they developed the concept of independence in their collaborations, where music and dance were created independently and only combined during the performance. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? But they must have discussed a common theme, like a common concept behind it, like what they were aiming to do. They can't just do random stuff and put them together, right? Could they? But then how would you rehearse? Hang on, so that would mean that Cunningham made a dance work and Cage made a music work and just put them together at the end. So they didn't actually know how it was going to sound. And the dancers didn't know if they were going to fit the music. How would you follow the beats? What would you do? I have many questions now. So Merce Cunningham and John Cage met in the late 1930s and began a personal and professional partnership that lasted for over 5 decades. Their collaboration was notable for its approach to music and dance, being created independently yet performed together, an embodiment of their shared interest in chance and indeterminacy. Good things can happen by chance, and I suppose you could view life like that, I guess. Maybe misery is founded on plans, you know. Right, David Tudor. We can't talk about John Cage without talking about David Tudor. Pianist David Tudor was a close collaborator of Cage's, known for his virtuosic performances of Cage's avant-garde works. Tudor's understanding and interpretation of Cage's music were instrumental in bringing these compositions to life, because without him, would they have come to life at all? I don't think anybody else would have performed Cage's music, and I think the fact that his music exists at all is a chance encounter. I think chance really runs in his life, or he would say so. It's just interpretations, isn't it? The two met in 1950 through Morton Feldman, and Music of Changes was a sort of collaboration between them. So they met through Morton Feldman. But then maybe meeting Morton Feldman was a chance encounter. Potentially. You could argue anything is a chance encounter, couldn't you? Cage's ideas significantly influenced the Fluxus Movement, a group of artists who engaged in experimental and boundary-defying art practices. Allan Kaprow, a leading figure in Fluxus, credited Cage's work with paving the way for happenings, events that blurred the lines between art and life. Oh, Fluxus happenings! Let's look this up a minute. According to the Fluxus Museum, a happening is an assemblage of events performed or perceived in more than one time and place. Its material environment may be constructed, taken over directly from what is available, or altered slightly, just as its activities may be invented or commonplace. I suppose 4 minutes 33 is a Fluxus happening, you could say, potentially, could you? Someone tell me if I'm wrong. The event performance typically consists of simple everyday actions such as viewing a chance occurrence through a keyhole or polishing a violin. Cage's work challenged the very definition of music, influencing a wide range of genres and artists, from minimalist composers like Steve Reich and Philip Glass to rock musicians like Frank Zappa and Sonic Youth. Cage's ideas laid groundwork for sound art and the ambient music genre, inspiring artists to explore the artistic potential of everyday sounds. Cage's philosophies on chance, indeterminacy, and the role of the artist continue to be relevant, encouraging new generations of artists to question established norms and explore new forms of expression. John Cage's life and work represent a radical departure from traditional musical thinking. By embracing chance, redefining silence, and expanding the concept of what constitutes music, Cage left a lasting impact on the world of art and music. Suggested readings and listening. Definitely Silence, Lectures and Writings by John Cage, the main book, I think, just read that. The Roaring Silent, John Cage Alive by David Reville, might be useful. John Cage and David Tudor, Correspondence on Interpretation and Performance by Martin Eden. This would be a good book to read. I've had lectures from this person. There was a good lecture on John Cage and David Tudor and the whole chance and indeterminacy thing and how even their meeting was a chance encounter, and it was an interesting lecture. It's one of the ones I remember from a very long time ago. We also have some recommended listening. Sonatas and Interludes, 1946 to 48, good to look at. Music of Changes, 1951, 4 minutes 33. 1952. Imaginary Landscape number 4 from 1951. Maybe we can talk about these pieces in more detail later on as well, if you are interested. Music of Changes especially would be good. Anyway, thanks for watching. So this has been a brief overview of John Cage. Useful to start the research with the brief outside context, and then we can delve in deeper into maybe his pieces, a bit more of the avant-garde. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now. Music of Changes, 1951, a great year. A piano composition. Music of Changes is, oh, the words. Focusing on the creation of a work free from So let's look at Zen Buddhism and Eastern philosophies.